associated with the person who is the abuser having been abused himself or herself, and et cetera. And it seems that with that kind of pattern, that we ought to be able to come up with some kind of solutions to deal with this. What are some of the solutions to deal with child sexual violence and child sexual abuse, Ms. Butler?
Well, I guess one thing is making people aware and having people accept that it is a problem in this community and in this country, and stop saying that, well, it's not going to happen in my home, or it won't happen to my child. It can happen to anybody's child. And I guess that's the first thing, just be aware that it can happen, regardless of who you are and what you do and what you are, it can happen. And I think for so long we've kind of looked the other way and not always thinking about, well, because it's happening over there, you know, I don't really have to deal with it. It's everybody's problem and it's everybody's responsibility is the main thing that I think we need to get across. I wrote an article one time saying child sex abuse is everyone's responsibility. And I guess it's been about 4 or 5 years ago, but I'm remembering back to what I said. We all got to take some responsibility for this. The church has to take a big responsibility for this.
Now, why should the church be more concerned with this? I mean, why should it take such a great responsibility?
Because they come in contact with a lot of people and children and have activities. Saying, don't just think because someone, you know, comes to church that everything is intact and nothing is going on. Don't look the other way. That's just why I'm saying that. And not only the church, that's the school and anybody else, but because the church is such a big institution in our country and it's so important, especially in African American lives. It's an important institution. I kind of point to the church a lot and say, please deal with this situation. Just, you know, sex period. People don't even want to talk about sex. We don't want it in the schools now. Parents are not comfortable talking about it. Somebody has to talk about it. And people have to be, you know, saying this is an issue that needs to be dealt with.
Ms. Cannon.
I think there's a two-pronged approach to the solution, and that is to work with the institutions of our society, whether that be the church or the court or the medical institutions, where they are no longer turning their head, where they are looking this problem in the eye and saying, yes, this is a problem. What is our role in helping to end this societal problem? And then individuals taking responsibility to get the help that they need, and for victims to reach out as they feel comfortable doing so, to talk with the YWCA shelter, which has a 24-hour hotline, or to call the Peace Program, to talk with a trusted other, to break that silence, because there's so much shame around this issue of domestic violence that lots of times a woman will believe it's her fault. She's been made to believe that it's her fault, that she's caused the violence, and she hasn't. It's just what he has been telling her over and over again. So when she can begin to talk to trusted others and get, you know, the support that she needs, then this problem will begin to end.
As a matter of fact, I think, Ms. Cannon, you mentioned the fact of the shelters, various shelters for people who have been abused. Yeah. And let's talk about that, because I think quite recently there was an article in the newspaper indicating that some of these shelters are having some very, very difficult times in terms of support. Yes. And I want to talk about the kind of support that both of you receive in terms of financial support to do what you have to do. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the shelters and some of the ways that have been proposed to finance and yes, the shortcomings that you see there.
Well, first I'd like to say that both the YWCA Shelter for Women and Children and Peace are supported by the United Way, and we're very grateful to United Way. I think there's a misconception in the community that United Way, if they contribute to an organization, then they pick up the entire bill, and they clearly don't. It's just a fraction, it's a percentage of the entire budget, and so it's up to we who are in the agencies to raise those additional funds. Social services are all needing a lot of support, and financial raising money out in the community is a very competitive thing these days. Of course, there's foundation support, and there's local contributors and corporate sponsors, but all of those entities are really being pursued so much these days with the competition for dollars. It's very difficult.
What do you find in education in terms of the kind of support that you receive in grants and whatnot, Ms. Butler, for what you're doing?
Okay, for what we're doing, support is limited, and you know, there are some state contracts that we can do. There are a few grants, a few federal grants that we have that we can work with. But of course, we are a nonprofit organization, and there's always a need for monies. You know, people's salary has to be paid. There are certain things that has to be done for children, that type of thing. And so it's a constant battle, you know, to find funds to where we need. There has been some organization that has come to our aid, you know, for different type of small projects, and we work with small children also. Like we start with age 2 in a therapeutic preschool environment. So there are some people who say, well, they're friends of children, so they'll give some special grants for special projects, and I think we make it that way.
And so you're trying to find as much money as you possibly can, but there's always, what about individuals, volunteers? Let's talk about that, because I think that both of you would depend quite heavily upon persons who are unpaid. Let's talk about that. Start.
We do have volunteers who work with us in the court at the domestic violence docket, but the particular kind of work we do with the men requires so much training that we really can't rely on volunteers to do the therapeutic and counseling and education work with the men, but we do have volunteers, of course, that work on our board and help us raise money and that sort of thing, and who do work with us as court advocates on the domestic violence docket.
So not only do you work with the overwhelming majority of the females who are abused, but you also work with some kind of counseling program dealing with the abusers.
That's right. We have 230 men in our program right now who come every week for 2 hours of counseling and education. Most of them are court ordered, but men can also come to us on a volunteer basis. And then we have a staff person that works with the women, basically to make sure that the women know the services available for them through the YWCA shelter and domestic violence program. That program has support groups for women who have been battered. We have one staff person who works over the phone with the women, primarily to get them linked up with other resources in the community.
And so you've got, at present, in your program alone, at least 250 men. Many of them have been ordered by the court to be a part of those programs. Now, what is that representative of the number of men that are involved in these various programs, not only in your center but throughout, you know, having had that kind of contact with other centers?
Domestic violence is the most underreported crime in America. So I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. I know the police department says that they're dispatched 650 times each month to homes where there is a plea for help for domestic violence. So I don't think that we have a true reading just by virtue of what the criminal justice system is reporting and what the extent of the problem is. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports 6 million women being beaten each year and 4,000 of them dying. Last year in 1992 in Davidson County, 22 women were the victims of domestic violence, assault and homicide.
And so, it's a real problem.